Hello, everybody. My name is David Levithan. I, like my colleague Maeve, I can tell from the background, are coming to you from the Scholastic HQ, whereas Cassandra and Jalen are coming from the comfort of their homes. Which of us is half is wiser and which not, you can decide. But we're so excited to be here to talk about publishing, which is something that we all live and breathe every day here at Scholastic, and hopefully can answer your questions and give you a sense of sort of what publishing is like and how to get in the door, both working in publishing, but also as artists and as writers. At the top, and you can read in my square, my name is David Levithan. I started here at Scholastic as an intern in the summer between my sophomore and junior of college, which was a while ago. We didn't have email. That's how long it was. But basically, learned that being paid to think like a 13-year-old girl was my exact skill set. I started working on the Babysitters Club. I still work on the Babysitters Club at times with Cassandra and Maeve. So it all comes full circle. I also work on the Hunger Games, and we had a really big week last week with the release of Sunrise on the Reaping, and that's pretty much my range, is Babysitters Club to Hunger Games. I think that pretty much encompasses what I do. I'm the publisher in the editorial group in the book group here. So basically, I do the division that is everything from chapter book to YA. But again, we do all sorts of things here at Scholastic, and we have a wide range here amongst us. And I'm really glad the four of us are sort of tag teaming here to talk to you about publishing. So I will throw it next to Cassandra.
Hi, my name is Cassandra Pelham Fulton. I also started as an intern. So I was part of a fellowship, a summer fellowship for 3 summers after my sophomore, junior, and senior years in college. And then the summer after the fall, after my senior year in 2006, I started a full-time job in the, for both being an editorial assistant for both the Graphics imprint and Scholastic Press imprints. So for a while I worked, I assisted in both novels and chapter books and graphic novels, and then eventually I started editing novels and graphic novels, and then eventually started editing only graphic novels. And now I'm the editorial director of the Graphics imprint. And I think I already saw a question about whether we do the Babysitters Club graphic novels, and we do, and I am one of the editors on them. I'm the main editor, lead editor on it, I guess. So yes, we're up to book 17 just came out.
Awesome. All right, Maeve?
Hello. My name is Maeve Norton, and I am an art director in our trade fiction group. I work very closely with David and Jalen. So kind of a similar scope to what David said, from Babysitters Club to Hunger Games is about the age range that I specialize in. I've been at Scholastic coming on 10 years this December. I started as a freelance designer working on Branches books, and then I weaseled my way into this team to work on covers, and I have been here ever since. I'm also an illustrator, hand letterer, and an occasional map maker in my spare time, where I make book covers for other publishers or other self-publishing people.
Awesome. All right, then finally Jalen.
Hi, I'm Jalen Garcia Hall. I am an assistant editor in David's group. I work directly under David, and basically I assist in David's tasks, which are often like doing paperwork kind of things, and then also I edit some of my own books. So I also focus primarily on middle grade and YA. I had a really convoluted introduction to the industry. I did not intend to work in publishing in college. I didn't go to college for, I wasn't a publishing English major, but I ended up making a really good impression on someone while I was working in retail, a customer, and they hooked me up with an email address to someone in the industry, and I managed to get a informational interview through that, and then eventually an internship, and that landed me here at Scholastic.
I love that. It is one of the more random routes to publishing, but
Yeah.
I think shows, again, that oftentimes I'm asked sort of what are we looking for when we're hiring or when we're bringing people on, and genuinely, like, number one is a love of books. Like, it is, if you can, like, come in and have an interview and just, it's a fun conversation about books, like, that is, like, base level what we're looking for. We had somebody in the design department who we had a Zoom interview, and basically she jumped on furniture to get to her bookshelf to show us her favorite book covers. And basically, like, she had the job, like, sewn up just from that action. And just showing that again, it is great if you have an art background, or if you have a writing background or an editing background. We always look at a resume for appropriate skills, but honestly, it is that enthusiasm and the idea that you want to work with books more than you want to work on anything else. If that gets conveyed, that's a pretty big plus in the column. So there have been a lot of questions. There were a lot of questions sort of leading up to the seminar, and pretty understandable for an audience of young writers and young artists. A lot of them wanted to know sort of submissions. What are you looking for in a submission? So Jalen, I know you get submissions for novels. When you're looking at novels, what are you looking at? Cassandra, when you're looking at graphic novels, sort of what is it that appeals to you? Do you get we're always asked, do you get the text and the illustration together, or is it sometimes separate? And then Maeve, obviously, when you are looking for illustrators to do covers for books or do interiors for books, what are you looking for? I guess let's give the artist preference this time and start with you, Maeve.
When I'm looking for an artist for a cover, it really can run a scope of a lot of different directions. Sometimes we work with photographers. Sometimes we work with true designers who are just doing type design. Sometimes we work with illustrators who might work in a varying different mediums, whether that's painting, traditional, 3D, sculptural, illustration, digital. So a lot of people ask me often, like, is it okay if I paint? Is it okay if I do sculpture? Everything is okay. There is the right book for your style somewhere. So that is never a barrier when I'm looking for artists. I also get asked a lot if you have to have an agent to do book cover art, and the answer is no, you don't. When I'm looking for an artist, I'm not looking for only agented artists. I'm looking for new, young, exciting talent, as well as people who are known and respected in the industry, or maybe someone more established. So you don't have to have an agent. You don't have to have done a book cover. You just have to have really good work. I'm often looking for character development, someone who can draw a character maybe in a few different scenes or a few different emotions, and really leaning into body language and facial expression to show emotion. They say when you're walking through a bookstore, you see a cover for 3 seconds. And we in the design department have 3 seconds to catch your eye and tell you what the story is about and get you hooked and want to read it. And a huge way we do that is through the character and how the character is going to pull you in. With that, I'm also looking for the character interacting with their environment. So I get a lot of submissions sometimes, just a character on a plain background, and then a beautiful background and a beautiful scene. And I really look for someone who can marry those two things and use the environment as a narrative element to help push the story along. So talented artists, no matter what the medium is, brand new artists or artists who are really established, strong characters, strong environments, and they're all working together to tell the story is really what I'm after.
So one of my favorite things about comics is that you can tell, I think, literally any kind of story in comics format. And I am looking for a compelling story that feels original or surprising in some way. Middle grade graphic novels in particular have really exploded, and there are a lot of them out there. And I think I'm looking for really special projects that feels singular in a way. Unforgettable characters that I can really connect to. I love to feel a strong emotional connection to the protagonist, and so that I'm really in it with them. I'm really in the story with them. And of course, with art, I think editing graphic novels is like part being editor, part being an art director of sorts. And I look at for striking artwork that feels polished in its execution, not necessarily in style, but like it feels like it could really sit on its own on a shelf. And those are kind of like the main things: the confidence in storytelling and in art creation. Also, I look for that.
I am at the point in my career where I'm not super picky. I'm interested in all kinds of stories, so I'm looking out for all kinds of stories. I like different kinds of writing styles as well, but generally I want to either like not notice it at all or be really sucked into the beauty of the writing style or like the novelty of it. I generally am looking for stories that, tell, it doesn't necessarily have to be like trope free or anything, but I do want to see like a unique frame for the story and a unique perspective. I'm always looking to read books by Indigenous authors, by queer authors, by disabled authors. Those are the stories that tend to move me in particular. But everyone at Scholastic sort of has their own niche and environment that they really love.
I think really for me it is about a story that's told in a different way and does grab me. It's really interesting because a lot of people, when they send in submissions, they try to parrot what's popular, and they try to make it seem similar to something that is already successful. But in my mind, that's already been done. There's no use in chasing a trend. By the time your book comes out, it takes a year basically between when you finish the editorial process and the book comes out. So if right now, if like dragon romance is the big hot thing, which strangely it is, that's not what I'm looking for. If you tell a dragon romance in a way that I've never seen a dragon romance told before, that will get my attention. But if it seems like you've a mimeograph of something that's already been done, it's not as exciting to me. I also really, for writing, can't stress enough how important it is to have an amazing opening page or opening 2 pages. That when I get a submission and I can see the quality of the writing or the plot just kicks in and grabs me from the very beginning, that means that I'm going to give it a really thorough consideration. If you think, oh, it takes a few pages to get going, or, oh, well, I'm going to start slow, but then there's going to be this real big twist at the end of chapter 1, like I might not make it to chapter 1. So I think having that up front, again, it's almost like a reader. Again, we're a little better off than the art department. We don't get 3 seconds, but we definitely get 3 pages. And if a reader in a store is reading and isn't grabbed by those first 3 pages, it's going to be hard to get them to get the book. But if you can grab them, and again, it doesn't have to be with a surprising plot, it could just be really, really striking writing, then that's good. Maeve talked about it in terms of illustration, but I want to bounce it back to Cassandra and Jalen in terms of both graphic novels and novels, is the question of gatekeepers and agents. Can strangers send in submissions to Scholastic, or do we rely on the gatekeepers, and who are the gatekeepers that we rely on?
So for graphics, I mean, now it feels like most of the submissions that we get come through agents. Graphics was founded in 2005. And in the beginning, a lot of people were not agented because it was like cartooning for kids and teens felt relatively new still. And a lot of, I think, we kind of started publishing in a space where there wasn't a lot going on. So Graphics has always accepted submissions from people who aren't agented. I think it maybe varies by imprint, or maybe we do have actual house policy that Graphics does a little differently. But so typically we do receive submissions from agents, and we take those to acquisitions. If we want to pursue them, we negotiate with them. We go to contract, and then we start the process of shepherding this submission into a book, into publication. When we buy a project, we're really partnering. Like, it's not like, somebody works for the other, or like, we're the boss or they're the boss. Like, we're really partnering with agents to bring this book into the world and to nurture author, artist, their careers. I look at my job as I'm serving children in the books that we create, but I'm also serving artists and authors and just nurturing careers and lives, really. And so I don't know, is this like what you're looking for in terms of like how we work with agents? Is it, I'm just kind of feel like I'm rambling a little bit, but it's like, right, we do the negotiation, we buy projects from them, but we also do author care and author like relationship collaboration. We collaborate on caring for the author and making sure that they're getting what they need as we make this book together. And then sometimes challenges come up sometimes, and so agents help facilitate finding a solution in situations that can sometimes be difficult or just challenging. So
basically, just in terms of agents, we will work very closely with them sort of throughout the process, the editorial process into the actual publication. In general, for writers, an agent is like your first major ally, because they're the people who spot your writing very early on, and they're the people who are advocating to publishing houses to get your writing through the door, get it into the eye or onto the eyes of the editor that is most suited for it and would likely be most interested in your writing. And so basically they are sort of experts that you can rely on to find exactly the right fit for you and your book. And of course, they are going to advocate for you throughout the entire process. Like, we are often talking to agents even during like the actual editorial process, and then even afterwards, they are continuing to like talk to marketing and sales, things like that.
In terms of, again, how you get an agent, because again, most of the submissions we see, again, especially for novels, do come from agents. We do count on them to sort of vouch for the quality of the work, and just it makes us pay attention more when somebody we trust is saying, hey, you have to read this, not unlike your friends making recommendations. And basically what we often tell people, if you are looking for an agent, number one is look at the books that you admire, the authors you admire, look at who their agents are. Oftentimes they're thanked in the acknowledgments. You can then go to their website, see if they are accepting submissions or not. But having an agent who does have published authors under their belt sort of lets you know that they're a legitimate agent. And if somebody is writing something that you think is like what you're writing, it might be that the agent is up for that because you know that their taste might include that. So that's one way to do it. If you are a children's book writer or illustrator, we always recommend the Society for Children's Book Writers and Illustrators, SCBWI. Is a great organization that creates lots of events where authors and illustrators, both published and aspiring, can network with agents, and they will not invite anyone to their party who is not a legitimate, respectable agent. And so they're a great way to be introduced in a very low pressure way to different agents. And then also, again, looking at agents' websites, looking at agents' social media. If an agent is looking for something, they often will communicate that out and put out a call. And oftentimes, if you feel that you could meet that call, it's a great way to get into the door. So I do see that the questions are coming in, which is great. I encourage everybody, please use the Q&A tab to ask questions. We will get to them for the second half of our program. We are not willfully ignoring you. We're just putting it off for a little bit longer as we talk amongst ourselves. But again, please ask anything you'd like about publishing, writing, art, as those intersect with publishing. We're happy to answer. So I guess the again, another question that came up before this panel when people were asked questions was sort of how do I get in the door? And again, either to publishing itself, like if they want to work at a publisher, what are the best ways? There's a question about internships, or other ways to get your work noticed by people inside of publishing, outside of having an agent.
I guess I could start. I wrote like a bunch of notes for this, both for writers and for people interested in publishing. So first of all, for writers, I would always suggest getting multiple reads from your peers before you go out to agents. That will give you insights onto any sort of like weaknesses or things that you could add to your work to make it as strong as possible before you actually get to the agent portion of your career. Of course, you want to find a hook that will get eyes on the book. David talked about this pretty extensively before, but early on, like, it is very useful to have something that is like a very immediate draw into the world of your novel. And of course, it helps when you're querying to have an interesting hook before the agent actually sees your text. Of course, be patient. It takes, months, maybe years to write a book. And the whole publishing process is often a years-long process. So it requires a lot of patience. Don't be worried or scared about failure or like getting rejected. It's, first of all, I can say confidently that it is pretty common to be rejected, and it is not necessarily that you are a bad writer. There are like any number of reasons why that might occur. But like, the more you try, the more likely it is that you will find the sort of niche that you are looking for. And the more likely it is that you'll find an agent who will be your best advocate. And then also just read things in the genre that you're interested in, because it will tell you where the market is. It will tell you the kind of style that people are drawn to. And it just serves as good inspiration and helps you become better as a writer. And then for people who are getting interested or who want to be a part of the industry, definitely cold emails are your friends. As I said, I got an email address and I managed to get a career out of it. So I am not, I'm definitely advocating for that kind of process. David mentioned looking for agents in the acknowledgements, but you can absolutely look for editors in the acknowledgements. You can often find a lot of names in the acknowledgements that are within the industry, and through that you can do, if you're able to find their email addresses, you can write a cold email, ask for an informational interview, and then just, make a good impression. It doesn't mean that you have to be super confident or anything, but like come prepared with lots of questions. Bring your resume with you if you can. And I know that when I did my first informational interview, what really impressed Mallory, who I now work with, was that I brought like a sample of my editing because I had just read over one of my friend's books, and so I like edited it in the margins and brought that over and showed Mallory. And then just make sure you have a clean resume. Be ready. Sorry, just don't be discouraged by. You are going to hear so many times that it is impossible to get into this industry, and while it is probably more difficult than it should be, and probably like there are fewer access points than there maybe ought to be, it's definitely doable.
I was just going to chime in quickly and say one thing I was going to say is also read a lot and also visit bookstores, like real ones, just so you can see like what's on the shelves, what they're featuring on the tables, like at Barnes and Noble or independent bookstores, which are awesome places and really foster reading environments. Sometimes I get submissions and I have the feeling that like they've never read a book in the category they're interested in, or even know what we publish, or what kids are reading. So it's really important. It is, like Jalen said, to be aware of the market. And also for comics and cartoonists, I find that people get stuck, whether they're writing and illustrating. And so I would say start small and just try to finish something, even if it's like a short mini comic, or just so you can feel like you started something, you finished it. Your story has a beginning, middle, and end, even if it's a page or 2 or 3 long.
I would say if you are an artist looking to break into the industry, obviously the first thing you need to do is get that portfolio ready to go and ready to send out. And part of that is making sure you know what your target audience is and where you want this portfolio to live and the kind of work you want to be doing. I talk to a lot of artists who say, I want to do picture books, but I can also do covers, and I also do some editorial, and I also do a little bit of this. And I say, that's great. If you want to do it all, but make sure you're doing it all to the best of your abilities. If you want to do picture books and you also want to do covers, they both need to be 10 out of 10 great pieces for your portfolio, pieces that show the work you want to be making and show the work that you're capable of making. So get that portfolio ready. Similar to what Jalen's saying, ask your peers, ask for some reviews, ask for notes from your teachers, people in the industry if you can, and go to the bookstore. Really go to the bookstore, pick up the books that resonate with you. If you see a cover or a picture book and you think, I could do that, that's within my wheelhouse, that is what I want my work to look like, that's where my style is leaning, look into the back. The designer, the art director, the artist will always be listed. And I can't recommend enough reaching out for an informational interview, or to just say, hello, I saw this book that you worked on. It really spoke to me. I'm also an artist. I have a kind of similar style. I would love to pick your brain for 30 minutes, buy you a coffee, get your information on the publishing industry and what I need to do to break into it. And I can't tell you how many artists I've hired that way when they've reached out to me and said, I love this book you work on. I also do books. Do you need anyone, or can I just get my work in front of you? And I've hired so many artists that way. And it's really the best thing you can do. This industry is, obviously, you have to be talented and you have to be passionate, but you also have to be getting out there and making those connections and finding those connections where they're the right ones. So I also tell people a lot, do your research. If you're reaching out to art directors to see if you might be a good fit, make sure you're a good fit first. I only hire for middle grade and young adult novels, and I get a lot of picture book submissions. And, I have to kindly say, I can't do anything with this, but if you do some cover work, let me know and send it my way, and I'm happy to look at it. So do your research, make sure you're reaching out to the right people, and just get yourself out there. The worst thing that can happen is they don't answer you, and that's not that bad. The best thing that can happen is your career begins, and that's pretty good.
What Jalen was saying is true. It is a very hard place to get into, both to be published and to work in publishing. But as I think you're hearing here, random things happen all the time. And all of us work with people that we're like, oh, that was I didn't know that we would end up working on 20 books together, but we just happened to meet because they were in my friend's band or whatever. I mean, whatever it is, or I met them at a party, or yeah, they randomly emailed me and said, can you read some of my work? And I will say it, and I totally failed. I failed to like acknowledge half of my life in my self-introduction. I've also written a lot of books. I am also a novelist. A published novelist. And I have to say, like, don't put the burden on yourself to just get a home run at the first time you're at bat. All of us, like all of my author friends, including myself, we have manuscripts in our drawer or on our hard drive that will never see the light of day. I had to write 2 pretty mediocre books before I wrote a book that was actually good enough to share with other people. And so I do think my advice is always to let yourself fail, and let yourself, again, take advice and revise and not expect things to happen right away, but instead know that you're building a foundation for your entire career. And you want that to be the most solid foundation possible. And sometimes rushing the first thing you have into that place of the foundation, that's actually not going to be the right foundation. Sometimes it is about, again, doing something not particularly successfully, getting really good constructive criticism, and then moving on to the next thing. And then a lot of the time, if you follow very, very popular authors, many of them then return to the thing that they abandoned when they were a youth. Like one of my favorite authors, and one of my favorite authors that I worked with, is Maggie Stiefvater. And her big series, The Raven Boys, was something that she started when she was 19, put down, it was in her notebooks. She then wrote other successful books, and then got to a point where she's like, okay, now I'm going to go back to that other idea, and I'm going to do it right. And it became her most successful series. All right, we have so many questions, which makes me so happy. So we are going to sort of speed round here, so not all 4 of us are going to answer every single question. But I do want to get to as many as possible. I will also say, if you put a question in the chat and not on the Q&A, please put it in the Q&A, because I'm not going to multitask. I'm just looking at the Q&A. All right, so I'm going to direct this to Cassandra from Randy, and I think the fact that he or she is asking this question is a good sign. For graphic novels, are there formatting requirements concerning page count, print size, etc., or is it flexible?
It is flexible. We publish graphic novels, or in the world there are published graphic novels of all page counts. There are a few like standard trim sizes, but we really kind of look at what might be best for the book, that particular project. So no, I mean, like a standard trim size is, just to throw a couple out, 6x9, like the Amulet series, Heartstopper, and then a lot of the middle grade graphic novels that we do that are more slice of life for coming of age are 5.5x8. Think Raina Telgemeier, Gail Galligan, Babysitter's Club, that sort of thing. So there's some range.
Do you work with teens, or do you only work with adults? Like, how old do you have to be in order to be published? So could we talk about that a little bit?
I would say for covers, there's no age requirement. If the work is great, the work is great, and that's all we need to know.
I've only worked with adults. I think Scholastic has published children, but over at Graphics, we only work with people who have just like early 20s, like just graduated from school on up.
Not to discourage anybody, but I published a few people actually through the Scholastic Art and Writing Awards. We had a novel contest, and we published some teenagers, and I really loved the books that they did. Interestingly, none of them became full-time novelists as adults. I'm in touch with many of them. They've had amazing, wide-ranging careers, but it was interesting, and I talked to them about sort of, was it too soon? And a few of them think, yes, it was, that they sort of rushed their voice rather than finding their voice. So again, this is not to discourage you. There are people who are published in their teens, but I would say never, ever, ever, ever put yourself under the pressure to be published in your teens. It doesn't actually make for a longer career or a bigger foundation. Again, the most important thing is actually working on your writing or working on your art to a point that it is really, really good. And that takes practice. I always quote Linda Sue Park, a Newbery-winning novelist, who says you have to approach writing the same way that you would approach a violin and playing the violin. You would never, ever, ever expect somebody to be able to sit down and play a concerto on the violin. You know that it's going to take thousands of hours of practice in order to be able to play a piece that is worthy of a recital hall. And I think writing is the same way. You have to write and practice and revise and get feedback from your friends and then revise some more. And that's really how you become a novelist. And a lot of the times it is also writing short stories, writing poems, writing shorter things, and building up to a longer thing also is helpful. Next question. How common possible is it for novel writing to be someone's full-time paying career?
Maybe the author should.
Well, I have a day job. I'm publishing books and I still need my day job. It is very rare to be a full-time writer, because again, you only can publish so many books in 1 year. It is not a predictable way to have income, because you really do go from book to book to book. Sometimes you can have a multiple book contract, but that could last you a couple of years. It's not going to last you 20 years. And so most of the authors I know and most of the authors I work with, they do have other jobs or do also do freelance things or other ways to support themselves, not just the novel writing. So I do think it is having a varied portfolio is how you actually make a living as a writer, is to do a few things rather than just the one.
Of the full-time cartoonists, I know they have an agent who helps them manage that and to get like a living wage, to help them achieve a living wage in their work.
Yeah, it's definitely possible in the art industry. I would agree that you want to be more wide-ranging probably because you never know when the work is going to come. So a lot of the full-time freelance illustrators that I know might do book covers, but they also might do editorial illustration as well. They might do some design work. So they have their hands in a few pots. But it's definitely possible. A lot of people do.
All right, Jalen, I'm going to throw this one to you. I've heard there are different types of editors for proofreading books versus editing for style, etc. Do publishers help you navigate finding those people?
Well, I mean, in terms of proofreading and stuff like that, that's sort of not really in your hands. Once we've gotten to the point where we have already selected your book for publishing, we are handling getting proofreaders and copy editors, and then we ourselves are obviously the people who are editing the more big picture stuff and doing line edits and things like that. So it's not something that you really have to worry about, I don't think. David, if you want to elaborate.
No, absolutely. No, again, we have a whole production department.
Yeah.
And we editors would be lost without them, because as smart as we think we are, they are about 20 times smarter when it comes to the rules of grammar, et cetera, et cetera. Do you ever accept comic strips from people without an attached illustrator?
Yes. For me, it is rare because the script has to be really special. Really, really special. It has to come, like in the writing, it has to feel really original. I guess an example would be Pearl by Cherie L. Smith and Christine Norrie. And it happens to be kind of a sparsely worded book. So, but yes, we do acquire script-only submissions. And then also I think in the middle grade space, we tend to acquire them more when they're personal stories, like only that person could tell that story. And that's what makes it feel really special.
Do you regularly change up with which agents you partner with, or do you have a pretty regular circle of agents you favor? How do your lists change over time?
I work with a variety of agents, but I mean, there are a few agents who might have several clients on our list at a time. But it's not really, yeah, it's interesting. I guess I've never counted up the number of agents that I'm working with at any given time. But it's, especially as more people start to represent graphic novels, the number has grown, but it does change and fluctuate. But there are some agents, a couple, like I've been working with my entire career. So it's interesting.
I accidentally raised my hand, but I'll also add that generally agents come to us. So we might have like conversations with agents, like we might go out for coffee with an agent, and through that they might get a sense of what we're looking for, and so they'll contact us with a specific book in mind. That being said, a lot of people have like returning agents, also just because, you know, they have returning authors. So you end up working with the agents of those authors continually throughout your career. I can't speak to the how my career changes over time because my career is too short for that. But definitely I know that as people like get to know each other in the industry, like it's kind of a small world, so people do tend to become more and more familiar with like a large variety of agents, and
Yeah, we work with a lot of different agents and agencies, and we have some that we have really close working relationships with, and we know we can always rely on them for a specific project. But we're working with new agencies, younger agencies, agencies that might do work that isn't specifically geared towards publishing. If they reach out to us and start a relationship, we're always open.
For covers, do you typically have the artist and designer be separate people or one person designing the cover?
That's a great question. So I, in my capacity, work as a designer. So if you are being hired as a cover illustrator, you are being hired as the designer. So they are two separate people typically. If you are an artist who has a design background, we might want to see you explore things like hand lettering, maybe some type design. We might want to see you do full jacket wrap art. But all of the design elements of the book, laying out the jacket, laying out the body copy, the interior, would fall on our full-time design department at Scholastic.
And for the fonts, again, usually the designer is the one, unless it has been handwritten, usually it is the designer that chooses the fonts, correct?
Yes, that's correct. And I always tell her, so I'm like, again, take a stab at it. If you're really passionate about it and you want to give it a try, I would never tell someone not to. But we might not always go with that direction. We might explore some other directions in-house. But the fonts are typically always chosen by the design team.
And then the question every author asks, how much control does an author have over the book cover and illustrations that appear in the book?
Yes, and most artists ask this too.
Yes.
This depends on who the author is. If it is a big-time best-selling author, they will have much more control over the cover. If it is a new author, what we call a debut author who's doing their first book, they will have less control over the cover. That being said, we always want to make sure our authors are happy and they love their covers, and I can pretty confidently say that they always do. We make a lot of books every year, so we really know what we're doing. So luckily, our authors trust us and they trust our opinion. And I always like to remind artists that the work we're doing, it takes a village. If I'm making a cover, I'm getting input from sales, marketing, publicity, my editor, my creative director. People are coming from this with their own unique perspective based on the industry that they're in the publishing world. And that's all coming together to make a cover. So our authors trust us, our illustrators trust us with our notes, and it really just depends on the author whether they get say or not.
All right, there are a number of questions that I'm going to jump in about poetry, because that is something, again, that we specifically have the lens of children's books and YA, which we actually publish a lot of poetry. We do a lot of novels in verse, both for middle grade and YA, and picture book manuscripts oftentimes are written in poetry. So I would really encourage people. The thing that is different for us is that it almost always is narrative. We very rarely publish a collection of poems where the poems aren't related. There really has to be an overarching narrative. And again, there are so many amazing authors. I would read Aida Salazar, I would read Karen Hess, just to Laurie Halse Anderson for YA, who writes in verse. There's so many amazing authors, and their submissions very much are the same as novels, that they will give us a selection of the poems, make sure that the narrative is there. And again, if the voice is there, we don't have the hesitation to publish something in verse. There was a question about, does the rule still apply for impressing in the first few pages with poetry? And the answer is absolutely. Start with a bang. Really put some of your most impressive writing up front, because again, that will really, if I open a submission and there's a poem that's stunning to me, like I am there. Like I will be so invested in that, because it is so rare to pull that off, that I will want to read to see where they're going with it and hope that they can sustain the narrative. So again, I think our doors are very much open to poetry. I will say, in terms of chapbooks or in terms of publishing a collection with an adult publisher, that's not really within our skill set here to talk about, so I wouldn't want to misdirect you, but hopefully the arts and writing people can program something with some poetry editors who can give you more guidance for that in the adult world. All right, I kind of love this question. For beta readers, do you recommend brutally honest friends, or are there professional beta readers, or does it not matter?
I don't know of professional beta readers. I know a lot of people who have their friends read. I don't know. I actually don't have much insight into like the actual conversation between writer and beta reader. It's usually like when someone is trying to be accurate or sensitive in their story that I get more of that conversation. But I know that people are in writing groups where they get like group feedback, and that sounds fun to me. But yeah, I don't have much like insight into that relationship.
I feel like, I could be wrong, that there are professional beta readers. Certainly there are some like people within the industry who freelance beta read. And there's like a subreddit for beta readers to connect you to beta readers. So that does exist. I also would say that having brutally honest friends is really good, just because they're your friends and they love you. So they are coming at it from that perspective. They're not a professional, which can be good because it gives you insight to people who are just reading to enjoy. And yeah, I would also add that it's really important that you are okay with criticism, as from beta readers, but also just from your friends, because like at the end of the day, the criticism is not to make you feel like a worse person or to make you feel like a bad writer. It is out of care and wanting your work to be as good as possible.
I would say I do think there are professional beta readers out there, but I would not ever pay a beta reader, especially as an amateur writer. Again, I would not fall prey to that. I do think it is finding the other people who like to read and write as much as you do, and forming a group, forming your peers, asking around, and again, looking for groups, I think is really, really helpful. Which segues nicely into this question. I did a novel writers group, and someone said my writing style, quote, did not appeal to a modern audience and would not be published, unquote. How true is this? How important is market appeal? Who is this modern audience? What does this modern audience look like? Is it true that everybody reads the same book? That hasn't been my experience. I'm gonna be candid here. There are books that I have loved that I dare say that Jalen, Cassandra, and Maeve have not loved. I'll bet vice versa. There have been things that Maeve is like, this is the best book I've read in years, and I've been like, I thought it was okay. You know what? You're not going to appeal to everybody. You just have to appeal to somebody. And anybody who meets your work with a generalization, that's not actually what feedback is for. Feedback is first person. It is saying, I've read this and this is how I feel about it. This is what I think. This is my reaction to it. And then you take it and do whatever you want with that reaction. If it rings true to you, then you should listen to it and be like, maybe they're saying something that means something. If it doesn't ring true to you, you should get another opinion. And again, if they try to make it about something beyond themselves, narrow it back down to them. But that's such a typical, like anybody who's ever been in a writing class, we know that guy. It usually is a guy. All right. Goodness, I'm conscious we only have 6 minutes left. There are a lot of questions about self-publishing, and whether if you self-publish your work, does that invalidate you from publishing with a publisher? Is self-publishing something you would recommend or warn away from? What are your thoughts?
Well, in my space, we've worked with people who have self-published or, self-published their own books and sold them at comic shows or Comic-Con. And like, for example, we came across Cleopatra in Space at Comic-Con. The artist was selling their own self-published Cleopatra in Space books. Raina Telgemeier used to create and sell her own mini comics. And that is self-publishing, even if, it's not like book length. Also, if you look at like the webtoon and tapas and all that stuff, like that's a form of, I think, self-publishing in a way. I mean, it's posted online. I don't want to, get too specific about the language because I'm not sure, but not every story, it's like almost like you're not creating for every reader. I mean, not every story is like for a major publisher or for a small press or for, I don't want to make any generalizations about self-publishing either, but I have worked with people who have self-published before.
And again, I think I always say, make sure that you are maintaining control of your work. That again, there are some self-publishing outlets that are great because again, they work for you and they put your book out into the world and that's good. But there are other self-publishing outlets who will try to take the rights from you, will try to control the books, will make it very hard for you to, if you want to publish it elsewhere later on, will not let you do that. So before you get into any arrangement, definitely read the fine print. Again, oftentimes I encourage people, if you see another creator is on that platform, you can always reach out to them and just sort of say, what's your experience been in this platform? Just be really careful to maintain control of your work, because that is sometimes an issue. If you have published on a platform that claims ownership, then if you want to use it later on in some other way, that can be hard. All right. Thank you all so much for hosting this. Mr. Levithan, you mentioned the importance of originality. Where, in your opinion, is the line between original and too original, i.e. difficult to market, find an audience for? I don't know that there is such a thing as too original. I mean, like, there's definitely wacky and out there and bonkers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But again, like, some of my favorite books totally are like that. I think you have to maintain coherence. And ultimately what we're looking for is storytelling. And I think sometimes voice or structure can get in the way of storytelling, just as in art, sort of too much talent, if you can't tell what you're looking at and you're trying to actually convey a story, that's a problem. So I think it is making sure that your story is still there. But again, I think you have really wide range as far as how you choose to tell that story.
Yeah, and just to problematize that a little bit, I feel like it's a lot easier to for us to work with a book that is incredibly written but makes no sense than it is to work with a book that has all the story beats but is like terribly written. So and also there are so many publishers out there. obviously I advocate for Scholastic, but there are just so many people who have specific tastes within the publishing industry that, like, you can, not saying that you definitely will, but you can certainly find an advocate for whatever style that you may have.
All right, I do want to get to this one. How do you feel publishing has been affected by the political climate? Are marginalized BIPOC authors still being advocated for and published?
We are certainly going to continue to advocate for the marginalized to the best of our ability for as long as we possibly can. For as long as I'm in the industry, I will be an advocate for marginalized voices.
Yeah, I think kind of like Cassandra said, we are here to like service the children, and we have to make sure that we're making stories and art for every child, and so it's important to get those stories out there.
There's so many questions we didn't get to, and I apologize to everybody whose questions we did not get to. We could have easily been here for another hour, but we did promise you it would be an hour. But certainly, again, if there are follow-ups, we can try to get answers through the Alliance. And Shannon is back, so back to Shannon.
No, thank you all for sharing your insights and expertise with us. I found this conversation so informative, and I think everyone else will find it helpful too.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye, everyone.